Hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, founder of the Criminal Mastermind, and with me, as always, is my man Seth Price down there in the Blue Shark and Price Benowitz headquarters. However, we are joined today by none other than an absolute legend in the area of intake and law firm operations, our man RJon Robins. RJon, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. And I appreciate being back on the show. I don't get invited back to a lot of places. So whenever I get invited back someplace, I'm particularly appreciative.
That is awesome. So, RJon, we're doing a series on intake, and it struck me that you have been advocating for the non-attorney salesperson longer than anybody else in the space. I'm sure you've taken your barbs for it, but it is something that I feel people are taking a second look at today, and just wanted to get your thoughts on this, on the concept of this, and where you've seen that evolve and where we are today as far as law firms being able to leverage somebody not an attorney to be able to sign cases.
Right. So, I went around the country in 2010, 11, 12, and 13. I spent more nights on the road during those 4 years than I spent at home on the national CLE speaking tour. And I went around the country and I spoke with thousands and thousands and thousands of lawyers on the national CLE speaking tour. And that was even after I had already worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of law firms at the Florida Bar Lomas program. And I got so much pushback on this idea. I mean, like violent opposition, maybe not violent, but certainly not nice. Got really bad opposition. People said some really bad things about me, and they would cite non-existent bar rules. Well, that's a violation of bar rules. That's a violation of bar rules in Oklahoma. That's a violation of bar rules in Colorado. That's a violation of bar rules in Arizona. That's a violation of bar rules in Utah. And wherever I went, there were these bar rules. And so I put out a bounty. And I'll issue this bounty once again now. And the bounty is $10,000 to anyone, to the first person, $10,000 to the first person who can bring me a bar rule of any state in the country that says you have to be a licensed attorney to sell legal services. I've been taunting my critics with this for a decade. And you'd think that if anyone could find a bar rule that said you had to be a lawyer or a licensed attorney to sell legal services, you'd think they would love to take my $10,000 and shove it in my face, right? Because people love shoving shit in my face. I guess I just have that kind of a face, right? But no one can do it because there is a difference between the practice of law, which we have to be licensed to perform, the practice of law, versus the business of law, which you don't have to be a lawyer to engage in the business of law. And you certainly don't have to be a lawyer to sell legal services.
Somebody wants to do it. What are the pieces that you need in that person? How do you go about
okay. I misunderstood. I'm sorry. One part of this, listen, I've been teaching this for a decade, right? No one's taught more non-attorney salespeople how to sell legal services
that's why we're
professionally than me. So there's a few parts of it that I suspect your audience is going to go through. The first part is this possible? Check. Is this ethical? Is this professional? Does it violate any bar rules? Check. Does it economically make sense? That's the conversation I was about to have to show you why it makes the law firm so much more profitable. But now what you're asking me is what to look for in a non-attorney salesperson.
And what are some of the hurdles or pitfalls people fall into as they're trying to do this?
Got it. Okay. So problem number one is, and this is why lawyers shouldn't be in the role themselves, right? Because they don't teach us anything in law school about how to sell legal services, right? And there are no CLE courses. I've never seen a single CLE course on how to sell legal services.
In fact, they probably wouldn't give CLE credit if somebody proposed it.
They should, because it's very ethical.
I understand, but I mean, marketing, there's certain things they will not give the credit for.
So there's very little resources to teach lawyers how to sell legal services. And most lawyers learn how to sell legal services from other lawyers who don't know how to sell legal services, who learn how to sell legal services from other lawyers who don't know how to sell legal services, and down it goes, right? So number one is learn how to sell legal services yourself first, right? You know that scene in The Matrix where Neo at the end, like everything starts kind of happening in slow motion and the bad guys are like punching him and he's kind of like moving out of the way because it's all happening in slow motion. Remember that? When you get to a point where you can deconstruct your sales meetings, your consultations with prospective new clients, when you can deconstruct the whole thing, see it happening in slow motion in real time, and explain to yourself why you made the sales you made and why you didn't make the sales you didn't make without blaming the client or the prospect, then you're in a really good position to hire a non-attorney salesperson, because then you know what you're looking for and you know how to train them and you know how to manage them and you know how to call them on their BS when they come back and say the leads are weak, right? So step one is learn how to sell legal services yourself in a systematic, professional, ethical way, which, by the way, we generate millions of dollars of revenue in how to manage a small law firm, selling all kinds of courses and programs on how to do that. But I will share some resources with you to put in the show notes for your listeners for free, just because of our relationship. And I want to, life gives to the giver, right? I'll share some free stuff on how to do it. All right. First, learn how to do it yourself. Second, engineer the role to be profitable for the law firm, and engineer the role to be profitable for the client, and engineer the role to be profitable for the person you're going to hire. I see lots of lawyers who have the best intentions, lots of law firm owners who have really good intentions, but they skip this critical step of engineering the role to be profitable. This has to do with the financials, right? So what is your cost? And you deal with this in Blue Shark all the time, Seth, I know, right? Your question, you're always asking people, what is your gross profit on a case, right? What is your target cost of acquisition? So let's just say, for argument's sake, that someone's target acquisition, cost of acquisition is, I don't know, throw out a number that we can use as an example that you see at Blue Shark all the time.
Let's use an easy number, $1,000.
$1,000. Great. So some portion of that $1,000 cost of acquisition is for the cost of the non-attorney salesperson. Now, I just have to say one thing to the lawyers who are listening to this and thinking, I don't want to pay the non-attorney salesperson, I'll do it myself. It costs you more to do it yourself than to pay the non-attorney salesperson.
It's also not scalable.
Sorry?
It's also not scalable.
It's not scalable. And you got to think about the opportunity cost, because if you can generate $250 or $300 an hour, you're effectively paying someone $500,000 a year to do the job of a non-attorney salesperson, which is stupid.
Right.
All right. So engineer the role to be profitable for the firm, engineer the role to be profitable for the client. And let's talk about why it's profitable for the client. It's profitable for the client because every dollar that you have to spend to acquire a client is a dollar that the client has to pay you in fees, right? If you can reduce your cost of acquisition, you can give the client more value. So this is profitable for the client as well, okay? And then, of course, you got to make sure that you engineer the position to be profitable for the person who's doing the job. And that's going to involve a base salary. Obviously, you want that to be relatively low. And you want some performance-based compensation. Now, here's what we got to talk about bar rules for a minute, okay? Bar rules do not allow us to pay non-attorneys a commission. Bar rules do not, I'm sorry?
A percent, something tied to the value of the case.
Correct. In many states, bar rules do not allow you to pay a commission even based on the sale. In many states, bar rules do, in every state, in in every state, bar rules prohibit us from paying a non-attorney based on the value of the case. Yes. And in many states, bar rules prevent us from paying a commission based on whether you made the sale or didn't make the sale, irrespective of the value of the case, right? So commission-based sales doesn't work for this role. So the way that,
But it depends if you're in a place where it can't be a percentage. There's some states, correct, where you could do $50 per signed case as long as it's not a percentage of that amount of money.
there's a lot of places where that's prohibited as well,
Gotcha.
because the idea is you don't want the person to have too much
Incentive.
of a incentive to make the sale at all costs, right? Same reason why you can't do family law, or same reason why you can't do family law on a contingency fee basis, right? Criminal
Wrong
defense,
incentives.
things like that. You don't want to create too much of an incentive to win at all costs, even if it's against public policy to win. Anyway, the point I'm making is, so years ago, what we did was we engineered the comp model, and you break the comp model into 3 parts, right? 4 parts. I'm sorry. You break the comp model into 4 parts. One part is the base salary. This is your base salary for doing the job of meeting with our prospective new clients and having a professional sales interview with them, blah, 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 right? Second part of the compensation is a subjective quarterly bonus based on subjective criteria, based on how well we like you and how good of a job we think you're doing, that is not directly tied to your KPIs,
Yeah.
right? You got that? All right. Then you cut the job in half. Now there's a second job you give the person, right? And the second job we're going to give this person is client care, quality control. So while all bar rules prohibit us from paying a non-attorney salesperson based on the value of the case, and many bar rules prohibit us from paying a non-attorney salesperson based on whether or not they made the sale, all bar rules, with no exception anywhere in the country that I've ever seen, and I've been studying this since 1999, all bar rules admonish us to improve client communication, more client care, more communicating with the client to let them know what's going on with the case and checking in on them. Yes?
Absolutely.
So we've created a second role in the firm for client care. And the client care person, their job is to check in with the client about a week after they engage the firm. Did you get your onboarding package? Did you get all your questions answered? Are you receiving our welcome emails, or is it going to spam? And let's fix that. Did we get you, did you have your initial conversation with the attorney or the paralegal, whoever is going to handle the onboarding? Do you have any buyer's remorse? Right? That should take place about a week after the client engages the firm. The bar rules tell us that they want us to do this for the client. Yes?
Yes.
Right. So I get where you're going.
About
So
a month
basically-
after the engagement, around the time that they're going to get their first bill, if you're billing by the hour, about a month after the engagement, you want the client care specialist, the client care person, to reach out to the client and say, hey, it's now been a month. You're about to receive your first bill. Ideally, the client care specialist should say, let's go through your bill to see if you have any questions. Do you understand these secret codes that the lawyers are using to describe the value, right? They're supposed to translate legalese into plain English that the client can understand, so the client can understand and appreciate the value that the firm has been doing for the first month, right? Someone needs to translate this. This will dramatically increase client satisfaction. This will dramatically increase your Google ratings. This will dramatically increase the chances of getting referrals and repeat business from the client. This will dramatically reduce the number of hours that the lawyers have to spend answering these kinds of questions for frustrated and confused clients. Yes? Makes sense. And we recommend best practice is at about 90 days, check in with the client again. Hey, it's been about 90 days. Remember when you first engaged our services? This is what was going on when you first engaged our services. This is how the problem that you hired us to help you with was impacting your life in terms of your time. This is how the problem was impacting you in terms of your money. This is how the problem was impacting you in terms of your reputation. These are all the things you said that you tried to do that didn't work before. This is all the things you were hoping to try to achieve to make your life better. It's now been 90 days. How are you doing? We give a shit about you as a human being. Even if your law firm does business to business, there's still a human being on the receiving end of the services who is being personally impacted by the work your firm is doing. And we, the firm, care about you enough to check in with you after 90 days instead of just forgetting about you. You understand the value of this client service role, yes?
So it's not, so meaning there's a whole world of work being done that's not just on the front end of signing up the case. That's the headline here.
Yeah. Like, all those things that lawyers tell prospective new clients when they want the prospective new client to hire the firm, such things as, you're not just a number to us, you're not just a case, we're not going to treat you like a piece of meat, we're not going to forget who you are 5 minutes after the ink dries. We want to create a procedure that actually honors those commitments, right?
Gotcha.
With a structured, systematic, organized 7-day check-in, 30-day check-in, 90-day check-in. You with me?
Understood. Let me ask you this. The skill set needed between a salesperson up front versus customer service, let's call it, on the back end, does that morph who the ideal avatar is to do the job?
Not if you have the right idea about who you should be looking for a salesperson.
Or there is, but it is not a traditional salesperson because there's another piece to it potentially, not potentially, the way you're laying this out, that it has to be somebody who can not only connect and sell, but can make sure that the satisfaction remains high over time.
What I'm trying to say is your question to me initially was, what should we be looking for in an effective, profitable, ethical, professional, a joy to employ non-attorney salesperson?
Gotcha.
And the answer is you should be looking for someone who, can I curse on your show?
Sure.
Actually gives a flying fuck about the human beings who your law firm is supposed to be helping.
Right.
And who brings that warmth, that care, that curiosity, that concern, that compassion, that interest to the front end. That's what you're looking for in a non-attorney salesperson. You're not looking for some slick huckster in a plaid suit doing a cliche sales job, right? This is the job of an introvert. This is the job of a relatively soft-spoken. This is the job of a person who's organized, who's interested, who's curious, who's compassionate. That's what we're looking for in the non-attorney salesperson. Oh, by the way, that person also gives a shit about the client 7 days, 30 days, 90 days after they've engaged the services of the firm. These aren't two different skill sets. These aren't two different people. Get the right person, and it does everything. But let me finish the compensation part of it.
Okay.
Because we were talking about compensation, right? So we're paying them. Remember, I told you there's 4 parts to the compensation. First part is the base salary. Second part is the subjective quarterly bonus. And the third part, I guess I said 3 and then I said 4 because I second guessed myself because I didn't know what you were going to talk to me about. There's really only 3. The third part is I'm going to pay you, let's say, $50 for doing the 7-day check-in. I'm going to pay you, let's say, $100 for doing the 30-day check-in. And I'm going to pay you, let's just say, $150 for doing the 90-day check-in.
I get it.
And you get paid when you turn in your report demonstrating that you actually did the job. So you engineer this to be a self-managing role.
Right.
Right?
Get it? No,
Law
I mean,
firms are
the
very
light
simple
bulbs are going
businesses.
off.
Sorry?
Right, because you're only paid, you only get your pay if the person is A, still a client of the firm, and you're incentivizing person to make sure that transpires. It's brilliant.
And so then what you're doing is every quarter you're looking to see how much did I pay this client care person, who, by the way, has a second job as a salesperson. And you're like, okay, wow, you know what? Why is it that I paid you $10,000 bonus last quarter and I'm only paying you $5,000 bonus this quarter? Well, because you're not following up with as many people, or because last month or last quarter you didn't close enough business. So that's how you engineer the role. So remember, I told you first is understand that it works. Second is understand that it doesn't violate any bar rules. In fact, it exceeds all bar rules. It satisfies and even goes beyond all bar rules when it's done the right way. I said number three is make sure you understand that it economically is very, very profitable for the law firm owner, it's profitable for the client, and it's profitable for the person in the role. I said the next part is engineer the position to be profitable. And that's how you engineer the position to be profitable. And then you were asking me, sorry, then you were asking me what to look for in the candidate.
That was the
And
next question.
I kind of stumbled into that answer.
Correct. That's the question du jour.
Someone who does not have a law license, someone who did not go to law school, in most consumer practice areas, they don't even need a college degree. In some practice areas where the client is highly sophisticated, you'll need someone who's highly sophisticated so they can just be at the same level with the person, right? The best place to find this role is hire one of your former clients. You do family law, you do divorce, you handled someone's divorce. They've been through the experience. They're a product of the product. They're a built-in advocate. They know what the person is feeling. They know what the person is experiencing. They know what the person is going through. That's where you go to find your non-attorney salesperson, right? I'm not suggesting like any random client. Obviously, they have to have the right skill set, the right personality. They have to care. They have to be organized. They have to be disciplined. And then we can train them on the skills. But go find someone whose divorce you handled. Go find someone who's been through a personal injury case themselves. Go find someone who's gone through a bankruptcy and knows what it's like. Go find someone who's been through the immigration process. That's where you go to fill this role.
So as you do that, and you've identified somebody, made it very clear the basic from empathy to giving a shit as important pieces in not traditional sales.
I do believe I said flying fuck, but we won't quibble.
Well, okay.
That's why I don't get invited back to a lot of places, you see.
So my question is this is the thing that I struggle with on a bunch of levels, but I'll start to ask you, when you hire somebody in an out of the box situation, you make money if the person stays with you for 2, 3, 4 years. Is there anything you've seen to determine up front from somebody? Yes, you have a former client, let's say, you have somebody was the avatar, whether or not this is something they could do day in and day out and replicate over time, or would it break?
Yeah, there are some things that I'm looking for. One, I'm looking for someone who loves to keep score. I'm looking for someone who really likes keeping score. They maybe this is a sports fan who knows the statistics of all their favorite teams or something like that. The kind of they like keeping score, right? Because this is a data-driven role, right? 2, we're looking for someone who's organized. They were your client. The client who brought you a shoebox full of shit is not probably a good prospect for this role. The client who came in and they always had their act together, they were always on point, they were always organized, that's a good sign, right? The person, you're looking for someone who is genuinely curious. Again, this person was your client. You know the clients who are checked out and they're not really involved in their case versus the people who are asking nitpicky, annoying questions versus the people who are right there in the sweet spot in the middle who are asking intelligent, thoughtful, reasonable questions, and you give them thoughtful, reasonable answers, and they move on to the next question, right? The point I'm making is by going back to your former clients, you've actually interviewed them for months. So you're looking for, that's what you're looking for in a person.
So I gotta jump in. I got a question for you. As Seth and I have seen, I'm sure you've seen it as well. The last 5 years, really since COVID, there's been a ton of advancement in hiring remote talent, people outside of the United States through agencies and directly and that type of thing. And I'm just wondering, I have, in fact, my entire intake team is all remote. I mean, they're all people who we go through their training and that type of thing. But it seems like a lot of lawyers who want to have this non-attorney salesperson literally want to wave a magic wand and just put somebody in the role and then ignore the role. But obviously with your trainings, how long do you think it takes to train someone up in this role, from newly hired to able to run without training wheels or supervision, daily on top of them supervision? Because I think the people in our audience need to recognize that this is not like going to the supermarket and buying a Snickers bar to satisfy you, right? Like you can't just take something off the shelf and expect it to just function, right?
Absolutely.
So how long do you think it takes to get somebody really ready? And have you seen differences between the offshore people and the US based people that are in these roles? So it's really a two-part question.
Right. So first, let me just make the larger meta comment. The larger meta comment is, I blame Tim Ferriss for this. And I blame him specifically for writing the book, which, by the way, I love, called The 4-Hour Workweek. And the 4-Hour Workweek, Tim Ferriss taught all of us before COVID about working with virtual assistants, right? And unfortunately, people took this concept of a human being who works virtually, and they somehow morphed it into this idea that if you call someone a VA, they should somehow magically be able to do things for you, right? A virtual assistant is exactly the same as an assistant sitting in your office. The only difference is they're sitting somewhere else. You got to interview them the exact same way. You got to onboard them the exact same way. You got to train them the exact same way. You got to hold them accountable to key performance indicators the exact same way. You got to manage them the exact same way, right? Just because someone's virtual doesn't mean they're not a human being, right? Your virtual assistant is a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife. They wake up in the morning and they got to take their dog for a walk. They got to get their kids to school. They got to figure out how to buy groceries. They got to figure out how to manage their household. It's a human being who just happens to be working remote. But lawyers who have never thought about the business of running a law firm have this idea, and there are unfortunately a lot of agencies out there that promote this idea, that hire a virtual assistant and it's just a magic plug and play that somehow absolves you of the responsibility of training them and managing them. That's called abdication, not delegation. So that's the meta conversation. Now, your second question, your question was in person versus virtual. Yes?
Yes.
Was that your second question, Jay? Well, Jay, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream? Wait a second. I can already predict. Your favorite flavor of ice cream is definitely chocolate. You know how I know that?
How?
Because you have a virtual intake team. If your favorite flavor of ice cream was vanilla, then you'd have a live in-person intake team. I'm being facetious. The point that I'm trying to make is live and virtual, it makes no difference. It only makes a difference depending on how you choose to run your law firm. There are law firms that are strictly in person, where everyone on the staff works from the office. There are law firms, Lee Rosen, who are strictly virtual, where everyone's virtual. And then there's hybrids, especially after COVID. We all learned we can have hybrids, right? In-person, virtual, hybrid, doesn't matter. It's a human being who needs to be trained, managed, and supervised. And then your next question for me, I think, was, does the role of non-attorney salesperson work with an offshore person? That was your question?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, my question really was, I know people can do it offshore because they're doing it for me, and we've never been more profitable. And they actually have a higher level of attention than I think some of my US-based people were doing it.
Well, yeah, because you can hire a higher quality person who needs the job more and appreciates the income more for less.
Yeah, for sure. My question, my second question was about that whole training period. Like, how long does it take to, because I see so many lawyers are like, well, I hired a V, they're going to take all of my intake for me, and I'm like, did you train them? Did you even tell them what kind of cases you want?
Why would I need to do that? They're a virtual assistant. Virtual assistants are a magical purple unicorn that don't need any training. As long as they're a virtual assistant, they can just do whatever.
And they're $2 an hour. They know everything, and they're $2 an hour. And it just seems there's so many lawyers who just want to wave magic wands.
Because the sales rep for the VA company told me a bunch of sweet lies that I was desperate to believe. And I'm such a naive fool that I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And I got seduced with the low price and inadvertently,
I don't think they have to be seduced.
My law firm off the fucking cliff into the wheels spinning upside down, and I lost $100,000 in revenue.
That comes down to the law firm owner. You've seen more law firm owners. You don't need a salesperson selling you VAs. People are like, they hear of VAs, they're just order takers. This is not like they're convincing you.
Jay wants to know what's the sales process.
Yeah.
Right. This is the sales process. I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm just going to tell you what it is. Right. This is what we do when we train non-attorney salespeople for the 600 law firms that we manage. Yes, that was a plug. First, right. So the first thing you're going to do is you're actually going to give them actual training, right? The actual lesson on how to conduct a structured, organized, ethical, professional sales call. Thanks.
And I bet you 99% of the lawyers in our audience don't have that for themselves. They don't write this stuff down. They just wing it when they get onto a sales call.
Jay, thanks for scheduling this appointment to speak with me. Is now still a good time to speak?
Right.
Yes?
Yeah.
Great. We scheduled this call for about an hour, so that still works for you. Good. Before we get started, I want to assure you that everything we talk about will be kept strictly confidential. Okay, great. To make the best use of our time together, may I propose an agenda, as opposed to, I'm just going to jam an agenda down your throat. Yes, you can propose an agenda. Great. So the first thing I'd like to do is gather some information about you and your situation so I know what's going on. And then afterwards, based on that, I'll be happy to share with you relevant information about our firm, so I don't waste your time telling you a whole bunch of random things about the firm that you don't need to know about that's not relevant to your situation. Then afterwards, I'll be happy to answer any other questions you have, and then we can start figuring out different options for you. And we'll go through some of the pros and cons, and we'll see if there is a way for us to help you. I'm not going to assume there's a way to help you because I don't know anything yet. And then we'll make a decision if we can work together or not work together. Does that sound like a good agenda, Jay?
Sounds like a great agenda.
Great. Now we have an agenda. Now we got a plan to follow. Okay, great. So now I need to get some information about you as a human being, your age, your income, your education, blah, 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 blah. Now let me find out about the situation. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. Jay, this is where you are now. Yeah?
Yeah.
You are unhappy. You know how I know you're unhappy? Because you're in a lawyer's office. Because you're talking to a law firm. If you were freaking thrilled with your situation, you probably wouldn't be here. So I want to understand how the situation is affecting you now, today, right? And you want to be in this happier place. Right? So how is the situation affecting you today? How is it affecting you today in terms of your time? How is it affecting you today in terms of your money? How is it affecting you today in terms of your reputation? How do you feel about that? Why do you feel that way? Let's dig a little deeper. Let's get to the real heart of the matter. Why do you really feel the way you feel about the situation? Okay, what have you done to try to solve this problem already? You tried this, you tried that, try the other. Okay, great. If I could wave a magic wand or give you a magic pill, if our lawyers could just do some magical stuff for you, because they're the best people ever, where would you like to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months? Where is this place you'd rather be instead? Okay, describe it in terms. Now let's talk about it in terms of your time and your money and your reputation. So this is where you are now. This is where you want to be. How do you imagine you'd feel being in this better place 12 to 18 months from now? You'd feel better. Really? Why? 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 Okay? Now, if you don't do anything, where are you likely to be instead? If you don't do anything, you'll be in this worst place. This is where you are now. This is where you want to be. This is where you don't want to be. Yes? This delta is the value that we can deliver. That's how you structure the sales call. So you train them how to do that, which, we train people on how to do that in like 3 days. We do a 3-day workshop and bam, they walk in, they can't do anything. They walk out, they're rock stars. Okay, great. Then what you do is you give your non-attorney salesperson all of your dead leads, and you have them do a week to a 2-week project to raise the dead. Ring, ring, raise the dead, raise the dead, raise the dead, raise the dead, raise the dead. Now, in 2 weeks, they ought to be able to reschedule some people, bring them back for a new appointment with you, right? And by blind luck, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, they're gonna make a couple of sales in 2 weeks. You want to watch them do this, right? Live in person, if you can, watch them. If they're virtual, you want to see how they're doing this, because what a lot of them will do is they'll make a call and then they'll go and take a smoke break. They'll make a call and then they'll go to get a cup of coffee. They'll make a call and then they'll go make small talk with their friends. And then this is not what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who will make the call, work, raise the dead, right? Now they can't fuck this up. These are dead leads. This is a very low risk proposition for you. That's what you do with the second 2 weeks after you train them, right? In many cases, by the way, we reverse it and we say, let's see if they can raise the dead first before we even invest the time of training them. So that's like either or, that doesn't matter. Then step three is you have them make what we call gas calls. Gas stands for give a shit. This is where you call the former clients of the firm to demonstrate to them that you still give a shit about them all these months or years later. And the reason why we're having them make these gas calls is because we want them talking with happy clients. We want them to become a true believer. We want them hearing case studies. We want them to really get enrolled and understand that the firm is really making positive impact on people's lives. The biggest objection we get for law firm owners for making gas calls is fear and insecurity. When we do our gas call workshops, we do a 3-day gas call workshop where we bring 20 law firms together for 3 days. And I can't remember the last time we did this, that they didn't make at least $1 million in sales just in those 3 days. Every time we do it, it seems to be around $1 million or more in sales during those 3 days. They book another $1 million in sales over the next couple of weeks, and they dole out tons of referrals. It happens very consistently, very reliably. And we offer what we call the $1,000 cash fuck you prize. And the $1,000 cash fuck you prize is $1,000 cash to the first person who has a former client who says, fuck you, how dare you call me to demonstrate that you still give a shit about me. And in all the years we've been doing this, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of law firms that have been through this, we've never had to give out the fuck you prize because it just doesn't happen. Maybe one day it will. Maybe one of the listeners, it'll be you, and you'll finally win the fuck you prize, and you'll walk away with $1,000 and bragging rights. But probably it won't, because it's nothing to be afraid of. Instead, what people tell us is, "Oh my God, the client who I lost their case is like even really appreciative that we care enough to check in with them 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years later to see how they're doing." So this is the third part that you want to have your new non-attorney salesperson doing. So the first part is you give them the actual formal training. The second part is you test them to raise the dead, or you can reverse those two. And that raising the dead is really just to see if they actually will follow a process, will they follow a procedure, will they just keep working and working, or were they going to get discouraged? Are they going to have call reluctance, or will they pick up the phone and dial, right? And there's no risk there. And they're probably going to start paying for themselves in even that first 2 weeks of calling to raise the dead. And then they're making gas calls for another week or two. And by we're now a month into it. And a month into it, you know if you've got someone who's going to go the distance. And by now, there's a almost guaranteed chance that they're already profitable right then and there.
That's phenomenal.
That's the training. I mean, there it is.
You know, and RJon, thank you so much for that. I mean, folks, if you haven't been listening, the last 25 minutes is a masterclass in what you need to do. You can't just wave a magic wand. You have to put in the work, just like you had to go to law school to become a lawyer. But if you put in this work, you're going to see the dividends. And RJon, I can't thank you enough for just breaking it down so simply, because so many people I run into are looking to wave that magic wand. They don't realize that it is work, but it's not decades of work to get somebody there. But it's just, you do the consistent work, you give them the script, you teach them how to do it, and then you let them loose to make sure that they're the right person for it. But I got to thank you so much for being with us today. We did run over, folks, but I promise you it was worth every extra moment of time, because that playbook right there is worth hundreds of hours of self-study in this area. So RJon, thank you so much for being with us, folks. If you're going to take us with you, you can take this podcast wherever you get podcasts. Just search up the recently registered trademark, The Law Firm Blueprint, and wherever you get your podcast, be sure to give us a 5-star review. Of course, you can always catch the show live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, live in our Facebook group, but also live on LinkedIn. Seth, that's going to do it for me. How about from you?
That's great. Thank you, RJon, for your time. Look, this is a very complicated process. We just started to scratch the surface on it, but it has given me a lot of food for thought, so appreciate it very much.
And I got a feeling, RJon, if you don't mind, you're going to be back on again real soon, because you've got such good knowledge in this area that people need to hear. So I really appreciate you being with us today. And I actually already sent a message out to my intake saying, hey, I got something you got to listen to right after I get off this call. So we're putting this stuff into play today at my firm, and I hope you do it today at your firms as well. That's going to do it for me. I'm Ruane. He's Seth Price. And the man down there is RJon Robins. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.